Welcome to the 12 Stones podcast, brought to you by Right to an Ozarks. As usual, we have Deborah and Gretchen here, but our guest today is David Rice
of Hit Christian,
Substack. And you're also on
Rumble, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Missouri Liberty Radio out of Owensville.
Okay, awesome. And you're pretty infamous in this area, but they would just type in Hit Christian in case they don't already know you.
Yeah, Google, or Ozark Chit Chat, or Nixa Community, or...
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're happy to have you. Thanks for coming.
It's Turnabout. It's fair play because you're the one who usually does the interviewing, so now it's your turn to be interviewed.
Yeah.
How's it feel?
I've done a couple interviews where I'm not the one doing the interviews. I don't know. I guess I'm a little nervous.
Well,
I'm always nervous before my own too.
Yeah. Well, let's get right to it. What got you involved in the library? How did that come about for you?
I knew from the news that things like this were happening, and I knew that it was happening in other places. But I didn't really suspect that it was happening in Christian County because I thought it was a conservative county. For some reason, I had that expectation. And I had been sick for a really long time and not feeling very useful and not doing anything really besides sitting at home and doing, nothing. And I had an opportunity. I met Mary Hernandez de Caro through Kevin and Juanita Bright, and they showed me her binder. I didn't really need to see the binder. I kind of knew. I'm a postmodern Marxist, a former postmodern Marxist. I knew what was being put in these books. I knew the content already. I was fairly aware. And so I knew what the attempt was and why they were doing it. I knew the purpose of it. I knew that they were trying to divorce kids from their parents. I knew why they were doing it because their goal was to, if you can divorce a child from its parents, you can divorce them from their morality, then you can divorce them from the Christian religion. If you divorce them from the Christian religion, then you can mold them into anything you need them to be. And it was very important for the early Marxists, the early Freudians, to separate children from Christianity. The one thing that they lamented over and over again was how Christianity kept poisoning the morality for them. And no matter what they did, as long as children were connected to their parents, they couldn't truly get them to become good little Marxists or good little atheists. And as long as they were connected to their parents, they were always going to have this problem. So Freud talks about in The Future of Illusion that as long as the parent and the child has this connected relationship, you're always going to have this problem. And so it's very important that you divorce the child and the parent from each other. And so you needed teachers to go into the schools. And so he saw as a teacher a problem, a solution. And so he would direct the teachers to go in and teach this new morality, and you would separate the child from the teacher by teaching them that, God was false, and you do all these things. I don't think he foresaw that we would have to get to trans issues to really divorce them. But I could see what they were doing with the trans issues, with the sexually exploited materials in our libraries. And I knew that's what the end goal was. And so it just, all of it connected for me. And so I had a lot of spare time after being sick for so long, having seizures, feeling useless, that I could do something. And so I started going to the meetings, the library board meetings, went to the first one, just listened, didn't say anything. And then the next one I went to, I read one of the books. I can't remember which one I read. I think I read Jack of All Hearts, and then I read from A Court of Thorns. And so I read some of the sexual passages out of both. And I explained how both of those books were about sexual abuse and explicitly for minors. And the feedback was, well, no, they're not. And so, yes, they were.
They deny. There's just this.
They're very clever. And
well, they're clever, but they're not clever enough. But,
no, yeah.
It just takes an awake citizenry, I think. You have a very deep understanding of this stuff. What is your educational background? That interests me a lot because you have a perspective that a lot of people don't have.
So I've never actually said what my educational background is before. I've always kind of hidden it because the people on the left tend to think that they're smarter than me. And I call myself hick Christian because they tend to think I'm a stupid Christian and I'm just a hillbilly. I'm not from here. I went to SVU. I'm a transplant, but I went to SVU. I got a degree in English. I did not want to be a teacher, right? But it's just an English lit degree. I went to seminary for 2 years and got kicked out because I asked too many questions. Ooh, imagine that. And then I went to Missouri State. I had a religious studies degree from one of the most, probably the most liberal experience I could get. Mm. I mean, you couldn't have asked for a more liberal education, period. It was postmodernism, it was decolonialism, it was deconstruction, it was Sartre, it was Camus, it was Stanley Fish, it was everybody.
You mean all the heroes of the left?
Everybody.
Yeah.
I was well educated, well steeped. I wrote papers based on them. I presented papers based on them at college conferences. And I did it in, what's funny is I did it in a Christian conservative way. And so I was already at that time breaking down postmodernism within a Christian perspective.
Nice.
And so I wasn't intentionally doing it, but I wrote my master's thesis on how the Missouri's. So let's get the title right. How the Missouri Baptist Convention shifted its identity to match the Southern Baptist Convention's new hegemony.
Oh.
So the Southern Baptist Convention decided to have a takeover, and then the Missouri Baptist Convention decided to have another takeover, and I opposed both because I am that guy. And so I don't like power, and so I oppose power whenever I see it. And that's one of the things I probably agree with most of the postmodernists on. And I got in trouble for that narrative as colleges in the Southern Baptist colleges in the state told me they would never hire me because I wrote a narrative they disagreed with, even though it was an award-winning thesis.
Yeah, I think that speaks to what the kind of political situation we have. Excuse me, both on the left and the right. You have to be a true believer, or they kick you out. And I think that's why we have such a ginormous middle of people right now.
Right.
People on the right know how corrupt the right is. People on the left are appalled at the Marxism and the communism that has taken over. So
because discourse isn't allowed anymore.
Yes, absolutely. Discourse is not allowed. And also thinking is really not allowed because they don't teach, kids to think anymore. They just teach them to parrot the answers.
They teach them to be raised by the library, as the most recent merch t-shirts at the library say, raised by the library. Wow.
Well, so I know you really enjoy writing satire.
I have a gift for it, apparently. It probably comes from all the sarcasm I learned as a young child.
And it does gets you in trouble with your circle. Let's put it that way.
It gets me in trouble with the conservatives and Christians the most. I find that I can write a really great news article and everyone will ignore it. Mm-hmm. And then I put it in satire and I will get the attention for telling the truth. But then I get yelled at or called names or ridiculed.
Because nobody wants. Go ahead.
I think a part of you enjoys it a little bit.
There's
I'm gonna be honest. There's a part of you that enjoys pushing that shiny red button.
The shiny red button.
Yeah.
You choose red.
Yeah.
So, yeah. There's a part of me. I am a preacher's kid. I am an army brat. I have a tendency to want to make everybody uncomfortable. Everybody looks at me and they think I'm the well-behaved one. I wasn't. I've never been the well-behaved one. I come across that way. It's probably the oldest child syndrome. I come across as like I want to wear a tie and a suit. And I had 40 days of OSS. I was a kid who was constantly kicked out of school. And so I was not well-behaved. I still, when I read Harry Potter and I think of the twins and the mischief managed, the Weasley twins, I think that's me.
The red hair,
the ginger, the
ginger.
Yeah.
Well, tell me, what do you think is going on right now with the library? What's your assessment so far, without giving, too much information?
Too much information? I'd love to give a lot of information. I think it's a complicated situation because you have the lawsuit that's still up in the air. It's will they or won't they? Will the judge make a decision, and still trying to figure out what's going to go on there. And so I'm trying to avoid writing on that too much. Then you have the personalities involved. Mm-hmm. And so, and you have to be careful with the personalities, because as much as you want to ream them in the news, they're still private citizens. They're not always public figures. And so I can't really go after them in a public way. So that's where the satire comes in, because then the satire allows me to go after their persona or the concept of who they are, mm-hmm. without really going after the person themselves.
They're kind of like an archetype.
Right? Yeah, I can go after the archetype of that personality, behavior, their persona. Mm-hmm. Not really. They never got settled again.
They didn't get the depth, or they got lost in the depths or something.
Yeah. And so they're just swimming around in water that's too deep for them, and they never really settled on any land. And so they're wandering around thinking that they have this great depth of knowledge, and they don't really know what they don't know. And so you look at Miss Stuckness's last, her resignation, and she talks about all the books that she read. And then she goes right from all the books she read to the book burnings from the Nazis. And then she goes right into the Nazi stars, the stars for the Jews. And she doesn't seem to have a very good grasp of history. She doesn't really understand that people have been burning books for a long time. People have had pogroms against the Jews for a long time, but pogroms against other people too. Right. It hasn't just been a problem against one group of people. Right. History doesn't start in 1939, and she only seems to have this very limited view of the world.
Well, I mean, I think we're pretty much taught to our history is World War II and on. You know what I mean? They've gotten rid of early American history, I think, so that people don't really understand the Christian underpinnings of our nation. And so
I think it's fair. Most people don't have a clue.
Yeah.
Christianity and its impact on the foundation of our nation, Western civilization, Roman Catholic Church, and how it saved Western civilization. I think so many people don't understand. There was 6 books left in the world, and they all belonged to a Catholic priest. And 6 books in the Western world. The Islam had a few more books, but 6 books left to the Western world, and they all belonged to a Catholic priest. And that was it. And people don't understand how vital that library was in restarting Western civilization. And then they want to go, well, those Catholic priests, they diddle kids. And that's all they see Catholics as.
Right.
They have no idea the traditions and the rich theological depth and just the important role Catholics have had in maintaining the Western civilization. They're not perfect, but they have had an important role. And I, as a Baptist, have to. I get so frustrated with people who don't know their own history.
Right.
And so,
well, I think too it's conflating. I mean, Nazi Germany and burning books or trying to eradicate a whole race of people, religion of people, is so different than just saying, hey, this book has graphic sexual images in it. Can we move it from the children's library? Conflating those two things, it blew me away. It blew me away that she said that. I was like...
That's such a great point, Deborah, because that is what happens to a lot of people who are captured by the left. They globalize things. They go from A to Z.
Right.
With all with emotion and no logic whatsoever.
No discourse is allowed. If you're voting for Trump, you're a bad person to your core. You're evil. There's no redeeming qualities about you. If you think that, all boys aren't blue, doesn't belong in the children's section at the library, you're an evil person. You're irredeemable. There's no room for growth. There's no room for discourse. There's no room for compromise. I think that's kind of the root of the library issues, that there's been no compromise.
Right, and we're 2 years down the road.
2 years down the road, great amount of citizens,
Yeah.
So,
would you comment, David, about the ALA and the MLA? Because they're really just kind of together.
Well, they're a parent organization and sister or daughter organization. The American Library Association continues to elect, and I think the president-elect right now is a non-binary individual. It's a woman. Surprise. Sorry. Anybody
It's okay.
Did you just assume that?
Taken.
I always will assume that if somebody describes himself as non-binary is a woman. So it's almost always going to be the case. So they continue to demonstrate that they have no commitment to reality. They want to choose the most radical person they can find to be the person in charge. They want to radicalize our libraries. They want to radicalize our children. They want to have how do I say this in a way that makes sense so that everybody who is listening
is new to the
to the conversation understands. The ALA has, for a very long time, been playing a game with colleges and universities. They've been involved in this century-long progression of cultural Marxism.
Yes.
They have been working towards this goal with other people, hand in hand, on how to slowly radicalize. So we go back to Freud and we go back to Marx. Marx is older than Freud, obviously. But we go back to this. You have to really go back to Voltaire, but you have to go back to this old idea of atheism that says we know better than you do. We're more elite than you are, and we're smarter than you are. Because we're smarter than you are, we know how society should be ordered and structured, and the ALA is one of those groups of people that believes that they should order society for you. Mm-hmm. They want to be part of this hierarchy and structure that will tell everybody from the top down how things should work. And they are going to do that for you and your children, and they will do it through the books and through the publishers. And so they work with the publishers hand in hand to make sure that the books come in that have a certain agenda. And that agenda has been slowly creeping in. So they do things like Catcher in the Rye in the 50s. Mm. But then they will move into things that are more progressive. Nora Roberts is kind of steamy, right?
Yes.
So they started.
I don't know.
I think so, but they introduced steamier and steamier authors. But eventually, we get to All Boys Are Blue,
and Sarah J. Maas.
And Sarah J. Maas, which she's not a great. I tried reading Court of Thorns on my own just to see what it was about. It's not a very well written.
I had to do it on Audible because I couldn't.
I was going to challenge that book for the library, and I actually bought it off Amazon, and I couldn't get past the first chapter. The writing was so poor.
It's very, very bad writing.
But if you wait long enough, you go to the sex scene. So it's
a while into it.
For the first one, but the more she writes, the more sex scenes she has in it.
Yeah,
and the ALA knows with the publishers, and they know that sex will sell. And so they help work with, I think, I can't prove it, but I really think that there was some hand in hand with the Free Speech Coalition in the 2002 decision against Ashcroft. And I think all of these groups are working together behind the scenes to make sure that gets pushed through. And so they know that once sex sells to adults, sex sells to minors, and then they can really corrupt and change how children see the world. It goes right back to what Freud says.
It's dehumanizing, really.
It absolutely is. Yeah. It's what
I agree with that. A lot of the fantasy things that they're pushing for kids are transhumanism, animal kind of things, or different species of things.
Yes.
Yeah, it's what C.S. Lewis talks about in Abolition of Man. It's that hollow-chested man. And it's educating people up to the point where they have lots of intelligence and no heart.
Mm-hmm.
And so Freud writes Future of Illusion, and C.S. Lewis writes Abolition of Man near the same time period. And this is that two contesting ideas. Which one's right and which one's wrong?
Yeah.
And they're both competing for the heart and soul of the 20th century.
Yeah.
And Freud is winning right now. 21st century, he's going in strong.
I agree. It's almost like they care about their ideas more than actual human beings.
They have no idea.
Because, we had Chris Barrett speak out at the last library, and he's a gay man. So it has nothing to do with actual... We've had... person after person get up and talk about, being sexually abused or their materials affecting them as a child. And they literally do not care about people, individuals, or children. They just care about their ideas. That's their God. That's their religion.
It's about Marx. It's about what Marx said. We have to get to heaven. We have to get to utopia. And every means possible that gets us there is fair game. And so they need to get us to that utopia. They need to get us to the end. Mm-hmm. Their end goal for the ALA, for the MLA, for our librarians who are Marxists, who are willingly Marxists, who are unwillingly Marxists, whether they are on the library board or former library board presidents who resign, they are whether they're willingly or unwillingly Marxists, they have contributed towards moving us towards this utopian paradise.
Yes.
Because it is a demonic idea. It is always a demonic idea. You cannot create heaven on earth. Cults.
That's right.
Cults think they can create heaven on earth. Mm-hmm. Every single cult does.
What did Dorothy L. Sayers, who was a contemporary, a great writer, also a contemporary of C.S. Lewis, said something like, oh my gosh, the one of the more dangerous things about our society when she was writing this, I think in the 50s or 50s, was that the idea that there was the perfectibility of man. Mm. And I absolutely agree with that. You're not going to ever perfect man on earth. That's never going to happen. And so you schlep along the best you can with what best, serves mankind. And
it's a Nietzschean idea that some people aren't going to get it, that some people have to be left behind. And not only do they have to be left behind, they have to be culled from the herd. And if you cull them from the herd, the best will rise from the top to the top. And so it's not evil if there's no right or wrong.
Right. Well, that's true.
It's not evil if there's no right or wrong. And if you believe like they do, that there is no right and wrong, it's perfectly okay to cull out the weak, to call out the weak-minded. And as Christians, we are the weak-minded. We are the weak-minded because we believe in a fairy sky god. We are.
Well,
Yes,
that's
Sky
true.
Daddy, as I call him.
So Deborah, when you were talking about people getting up and telling heartbreaking stories of having been abused and stuff, and it's like
No effect. Yeah.
It's like, yes, there's
Right.
absolutely no effect there. And
I mean, I'm a human being. If a trans kid got up and said, "If by removing these books or labeling them, you're going to hurt me," and they cried, I would have at least empathy for them. I would be like, "I think maybe you're misguided," but they have no empathy whatsoever. In fact, they've even gone up to people and said, "You're wrong. That doesn't matter. That's not what happened," or whatever.
And David, you have a theory about that, though.
Which theory?
that a lot of these people have been abused themselves, but they've never processed it.
Yeah. Okay. So I do have a theory, and I'm kind of writing a story on this one.
Oh, is this premature?
No, you can.
Okay.
So Ash, I'm writing a profound comedy. It's a little bit about it's divine comedy. It's a reimagining of the divine comedy. And how dare I'm not sure I have the ego to do it, but maybe I do. So there's this idea that some people have been so wounded by the experiences of abuse that they'll say, "I will never allow this to happen to anyone else again." And then you get the Chris Barretts, like what Chris Barrett said.
Yes.
And then there's some people who are like, "I've been so wounded, I will do this to someone else."
Lena Dunham.
Then you get predators.
Right.
And then you get other people who have been like, "I've been so abused, and I just want my daddy to love me." And they look for the misplaced daddy figure in their life. Their dad or their grandfather or their uncle.
Or their mom.
So whoever. They're looking for that person who abused them. And so...
Stockholm Syndrome in a way?
Kind of.
Yeah, it's similar.
So they replace it. Since they can't have that repaired relationship with their father figure or their mother figure, the abuser, they look for it in other ways. And they look for it in society. And so they'll either look for it in an authority figure, a larger organization. And sometimes they find it like here in the library. And I think they're looking for it. If I could go find this person who might be a child right now, who might grow up to be a closeted gay man, who might abuse another child, what if I break the cycle right now? What if they're really just trans? What if I hand them a book and develop that trans nature in them so they don't grow up to be a closeted gay man, so they don't grow up to
queerness, which queering is really Marxism.
Yeah.
It's the...
And so I think they have twisted in their head that they can help someone else out so that they don't have to be that little child, that little girl. Because I think you see it a lot in white women. Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. We're not politically correct.
Immediately offended. I'm Karen.
Well, I wasn't meaning you. I was meaning the audience. But I think you see it a lot in white women who have this fragility in them, who feel like they have to please a authority figure in their life, and they feel like they have to fix someone somewhere along the way who has hurt them, and they think that if they can fix someone else, then they can avoid someone else being hurt like they were. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a deep hurt. And so instead of trying to solve the pain in their own life, they become reservoirs of, well, in my story, I have this edifice, and I'll have to be careful with names because I named the three faces. I have this edifice, I call it the Holy Trinity, but it is obviously not the Holy Trinity. Mm-hmm. Everything in hell is twisted.
Yeah.
And so they have three faces, and these three women have twisted everything up, and they have wombs in hell. And their wombs give birth to demons. Their pain becomes a womb in them. Mm-hmm. And so they're birthing demons through their pain. And so they twist the spirit that should have been life-giving, and they turn it into death giving. And so it's just this powerful image of what you can allow in your own life when you don't allow your trauma and pain to heal. And I think so much of what we're dealing with at the library in the opposition is women who won't allow their pain to be healed, who refuse to face the trauma in their own lives. And men too, but I think for large part, because we're mostly facing women, is women who won't face their trauma. So
interesting,
Very
isn't it?
interesting. Yeah.
It's very, very deep. And some of your satire is very dark. It's
Very dark.
it's-
What was the last one? The Cauldron with that
That-
freaked
that-
me out a little
you
bit.
was-
Why?
yeah,
You wrote a short story
yeah, that was
that, I mean, it was so creepy. I read it. It was so,
the night
For
fishing
viewers who may hear children and screaming in the background, it is Halloween night. There are trick or treaters everywhere.
They're not sacrificing.
Yes, I
children.
swear that my children are safe and cared for. They're not screaming in the background. It is trick or treaters. Okay, continue.
okay. But it's very, very dark and brutal. And so where does that come from?
I don't watch horror movies.
Yeah.
So here's a little secret about me. When we watch a ghost movie, I sleep curled up next to my wife like a coward.
I don't watch them either. I'm like,
so I am the coward. There was a time in college we went to go see a horror movie, my best friend and I, and we had separate rooms, and we ended up sleeping in the same room because I'm a coward, and he was a coward too. So I don't do horror movies. I never have, and I don't know where it comes from, but there's just, I feel like in order to tell the truth about hell, I have to tell the truth. I have to tell the truth.
Yeah.
And as I'm writing these stories, it makes me queasy to my stomach. I don't like telling them. I'd rather be writing about the Ragged Man, doing the redemption stories, which I've been holding back for a while. I've been writing these Ragged Man stories also. But I feel like with the hell stories, I need to wake people up with them and get people aware of what's going on. They get me in trouble. They're the ones that really get me in trouble. Like the Georgie Cragg one got me in a lot of trouble. But the night fishing one was
such a great story.
No one liked it. My writers group, but no one liked it.
Did you publish that on Hit Christian?
I did when I talked about. So I wrote a little literary criticism, and so I just published it right at the beginning of it.
Okay.
So it's up there, and then the one you're talking about, the blood baptism of Brother Maine Coon Cat.
Yep.
Maine Coon Cat, and so there's a satire about. I have to be careful how I word this. There's a satire, and I want to talk about a situation that's going on in Maryville, and I wanted to highlight pastors who are more concerned about the wealth and power that they get out of the church and the people in their community, rather than getting to the truth in their community. And so he is willing to give up people in his church that are telling the truth so he can gain power in his church. He's willing to take on the Wiccan witch-like powers in his community. And so, yeah, it was dark. But when you are spiritually taking on that anyways, what else are you doing? I don't think people realize what they do to themselves spiritually.
Right.
When they take these things on. They just think, oh, I'm making a small step here, and it's no big deal.
Well, I think we're living in, the most wealthy country on the face of the earth, and materialism has overrun spirituality, even though there's a lot of spirituality, and I do think there's kind of a great awakening that I see happening a little bit, but I think they feel like the ride isn't going to end after they die, and hell is real.
How do you handle that kind of criticism from people, or that spiritual oppression that you feel? Because I think probably on a much lesser scale, Mom and I have dealt with it. it can be crippling at times, honestly.
Yeah.
It's harder to deal with it. I can actually deal with it from the libs a lot easier than from the Christians.
Right. No,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, the libs, it's sort of like Jesus on the cross. It's like, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
Mhm.
It's like they
You,
don't.
yeah.
They don't. And I've developed a tougher skin with them. It's like when there's this one individual that goes to library board meetings, and she used to change her name all the time and then give me grief on the Substack, and I just kind of like, whatever, Charlie. That's one of the names she likes to use. But that doesn't bother me. But when it's the Christians who come after me, it cuts like a knife. And I don't know how to, it's hard to overcome that. I've lost a lot of friendships, people who won't talk to me, or if they talk to me now, they only want to talk to me to get things out of me. They won't talk to me just to, it's a dead friendship.
Yeah.
And they just want to use me now for a resource, for knowledge, or I'm no longer a value to them except as a resource, and not as a person.
What do you like about writing news stories about the library and other things too? Because you've actually interviewed people like Chris Ann Hall and who else? I mean, you've interviewed some.
Well, I've interviewed Chris Ann Hall. I like Dr. Wes Scroggin. He's a good interview.
Yeah.
I've interviewed Chris Barrett.
So Chris Barrett is with Gays with Groomers. Chris Ann Hall
she's just famous on her own.
A constitutional lawyer.
Yeah.
Dr. Scroggins is with Abolish Abortion, Missouri. Yeah. So.
I like the interviews the most. I like doing the book interviews. The interviews are fun because they're laid back. I don't ever go in with questions. People always ask me, what questions are you going to ask me? And I'm like, I don't have questions. I don't have expectations. I'm going to go into a conversation. We're just going to talk. And so it's fun that way for me because it's more laid back. It's a little bit more relaxed. I might do a little bit of research just so I can say, here's your bio up front. But for the most part, I'll also read the book if there's a book to be read. But I don't want to go in with like, we're going to follow a formula and we're going to do A, B, C, and D. And then if we get off that, I'm going to try pulling you back. Because we get off of, maybe we find something more interesting to talk about. So
yeah. That's nice. That's nice.
We don't know.
Yeah.
And the writing, who knows? I was always a good writer, which sounds like ego, but I was always a good writer, and I stopped writing for a long time. And I gave it up because I thought I was a terrible writer. And so.
Who told you that?
Professors.
Well, I know nothing.
So, I give it up.
So I do want to talk about the press a little bit.
Okay.
What's your opinion of our local press?
Well, Christian County headliner. Well, we know that.
Well, we have that, and there's other, ones around here.
Well, we know a lot of the press, like the headliner, are just bought out by wealthy people, and they're just advertising dollars.
Yes.
So they have no value to the community whatsoever.
Other than if you want to clip coupons or find a sale or something.
Yeah,
like that.
they might as well be the penny pincher.
Yeah.
And the article, whatever articles go in, are pre-programmed articles. They're of no value. Then you're looking at the news leader, which are bought out by these giant conglomerates, and they don't care about the local news any more than the guy who's doing the advertising dollars. He just doesn't care. They don't care. No, news is pretty much dead. Outside of a handful of people like you and me doing news, there really isn't anyone. And then when we try doing news, we get crucified. So how dare you? And so and the media doesn't really, the other media doesn't really like us doing news. And then the politicians don't like us doing news because they weren't holding them accountable. And then the central committees don't like us doing news. You can't get a Democrat to talk to us. You can't get a Republican to talk to us anymore. And so it's a mess.
Yeah.
We're just out here doing our best.
Yeah.
I don't even want to be doing it half the time. I think I made a meme on our TikTok about Claudette Riley one time where I was like, I'm only doing this because you
You're
can't
not
do your
doing
job.
You won't do your
And
job.
I was like, that's really how I felt too, because I'm like, come on, if you guys would write a decent news article or like give us some fair coverage or just like a reasonable shake on any of this.
Yeah, well, I just what I've observed is, and these people are perfectly nice. I don't want to say they're not, nice people.
Right, nothing against Claudette Riley, but
yeah, but
a
the
little bit.
slant is so left. They've been steeped in journalism school in leftist politics, just like most other colleges, So they come out of there with this viewpoint that has been
Right.
infused into them.
They're just in the machine. They're not. They don't want to think about it independently either. They just want to.
Well,
do
and
the
they
machine.
don't even. This is the thing that gets me. Journalistic ethics. They don't even feel the obligation to try and give a fair
the other
and balanced
point of
view. Most of them, and I find that very disheartening. And
they don't want to be fair. It doesn't even click in their minds because that's not how it works. It comes back to that postmodern way of thinking. There is no truth.
Mm-hmm.
And if there is no truth, there's no value, there's no point in doing something for a higher purpose or a goal, then being fair, objectively fair. I would remember studying in class, when you talk about there is no objective truth, there is absolutely no point in doing anything for an objective purpose when there is no objective truth.
Do you know, I asked a guy that question. He stated that there was no objective truth, and I was on some forum arguing furiously.
Twitter.
Yeah, and I said, "Are you absolutely sure?"
Yeah.
And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, that's an objective truth. There is no objective truth."
Yeah.
And it shut him down because he had to literally admit, if there is no objective truth, that is an objective truth. Just to say there's no objective truth.
Probably one of the best things that ever happened to me was getting kicked out of seminary before I went to MSU, was because I spent 2 years being steeped in logical, rational thought.
Yeah.
And so even though I asked all those questions and I got kicked out because I couldn't buy into their way of seeing the world, I had a professor and he would talk about things like that. And he said he was at Oxford, and someone made that kind of comment. And he said, "Well, go run into the tree. If there's no objective reality, go run into the tree."
Yeah.
And, the guy didn't take him up on it.
Right.
Because the guy could say all day long there's no objective reality, but he'll never act as if there's no objective reality.
Indeed.
Yeah, and people live that way. They never live as if there's no objective reality. They won't go shoot their neighbor.
Right, or rob a bank or whatever.
Because they know that they'll get caught. So these people, they don't believe what they say. They don't act on it. It's all up here. It's all cerebral. And if it's cerebral, then it's not heart. And if it's not heart, they're hollow-chested men, like C.S. Lewis said. Yeah. They're just empty suits.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I know. It's pretty annoying, isn't it?
It's so annoying. Because
it's hard to converse with people who, like you said, they live in their heads. They're not really, they're rejecting reality in some ways.
They are. The worldview is empty. Mm-hmm. And they're just liars. And when you live in a lie all the time, and your reality is a lie, how can another person talk to you? It's like that Nada character I wrote in one of my most recent ones. She lied so much, her reality, she was warping the reality of hell itself.
Yes.
She lied so much, she warped the reality of hell. And people who lie so much warp the reality around them. Mm. And they can't see that everything around them won't change to what they think it is.
That idea of like, oh, well, this is my truth.
Yeah.
Or that feelings are true at all, because feelings are not truth. Feelings are feelings. They go away, they're incorrect, they can change.
Yeah.
How did you find your way? Now, you kind of went Marxist for a while. How did you find your way back to Christianity, or how did you, work that out?
How did I work out my salvation?
Yeah.
You
With fear and
can't
trembling.
work out your own salvation.
With fear and trembling.
Sorry, that's being a little funny. Um, I was never happy with it. I could study postmodernism. I could study deconstruction thought. But I think one of the things that unsettled me the most was we were having a conversation in the class, and they were talking about martyrdom, and they were talking about this Baptist woman who was sitting in a prison, and we were asking the question, why doesn't she just recant? Why doesn't she just say to the authorities, I give up. You're right. And these women are like, there's no objective truth. Why doesn't she just surrender? And I'm sitting there going, because she's right. Because the authorities are wrong.
You know, that's like that scene in the book, That Hideous Strength by C.S. Lewis, where they had Mark Studdock, who is the kind of anti-hero of the book. And the bad guys have had him for a while, and their objective was always to turn him. And the last thing, they put him through a series of really disgusting tests and everything, and they get to the very last one, and there's this big, huge corpus crucifix on the ground, an image of it, and they tell him he has to stamp on the face, and then he will pass, and he'll be, you know, one of them. And even though he was kind of not a believer, you know, much, in fact, I would say wasn't really a believer, but he intrinsically understood that they were asking him to do something that would irrevocably.
Did you know that's what they did to their first Christians? I think very, very early on, so that if you would stamp on an image of Christ on a cross, and if you would do that, you could renounce Christ and you could walk away.
I did not know that.
And that and this was one of the guys was writing to Emperor Claudius, and Claudius said, yes, let them do that. And so if they don't do it, then yes, kill them. If they do it, then let them go. And so the guy would have them do it, and that was one of the ways to be an apostate. And so of course Lewis knows this, so he puts it in the book. But that was exactly what they would do. And so that was one of the earliest ways to become a martyr of the faith.
You know, and in the book, that was the moment of his becoming human again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he refused to do it, and after that, his healing began. You know, the healing of his soul and his humanity, and it's really great. And I wish that for everybody, really.
Yeah, and that was the same thing for this woman who was in prison. She eventually becomes a martyr, and the women in the class called her selfish. Called her selfish because she had a child on the outside. How dare she, when she had a child on the outside, not sacrifice her beliefs for her child? And I think it was at that moment for me, it was like, okay, this is sacred. And I cannot continue these mind intellectual games when there's this sacred act happening here. And I couldn't go any further.
Wow, that's amazing. Powerful. Yeah, very much so. Why is Chicago trying to control Nixa, as Dan Kleinman would say?
Because they have
the great Dan Kleinman of World Library Association and
University of Chicago. I mean, it's very liberal. I mean, there's University of Chicago.
ALA is there.
It's
American Library Association.
And then they also invented the Sharabian guide style, so they're evil just for that alone. That's a religious studies major joke. Only. Oh,
that went way over my head.
Yes.
If you know APA, which is American Psychological Association style guide, that's Trabian is much more evil than that. So I think Chicago, it's that elitism. It still goes back to that we know more than you. It's Voltaire. Can I talk about Voltaire? Do I have time?
Of course, yeah.
Okay. So Voltaire wrote a treatise called The Three Fools. And in this treatise, he stated that if you believe in, Moses, Muhammad, or Christ, either one of those three, you believe in the three fools, they're charlatans. Anyone who believes in those three religious figures, there's something weak about your mind. There's something about you that's incomplete. And because there's something about you that's incomplete, you're lesser.
Mm.
But if you've woken up and you become one of the learned men, one of the elites, there's something about you that can be redeemed. So you're better than the rest of us. The rest of them.
Why would you need to be redeemed then? If this,
Well, you know, this
You're
is
redeemed
Gnostic.
from religion.
okay,
It's Gnosticism,
yeah,
which is rampant in society right now.
Yeah. So Voltaire is really
Secret knowledge that puts you above.
you catch it. And so Gnosticism is that ancient pagan religion, cult religion of Christianity. Voltaire is really reviving the cult religion of Christianity. Marx is Gnostic. Freud is Gnostic.
Yes.
Nietzsche is not Gnostic. All of them have this common thread throughout them. It's reviving a false religion. The secret religion. We are better than you.
Yes.
We know better than you. We're smarter than you. If you read Nietzsche's Antichrist, if you read his Thus Spoke Zarathustra, if you've read it, it's this prophet or this concept. We're just better than you are. You weak-minded fools.
Well, I mean, that's Klaus Schwab and Noah Harari and it's those people. It's them. It's the billionaires. Huh?
Bill Gates.
Bill Gates.
Yeah.
It's those, and you can tell that's just how they feel. The Hillary Clintons.
Yeah. We just see the world clearer than you do. We have more intelligence. We have more capacity than you do. We're kind of like gods.
Yes, that's it.
And you're sheep. Well, and sheep to be slaughtered. Mm-hmm. You are food. And that's where satire comes from. My satire is, that's a part of my satire right there, is that concept of they're better than us and we are sheep and we are meant to be food for them. And so with that idea, I started almost everything. Baloo was my very first satire.
I love Baloo.
Yeah, poor Baloo. I am going to write an animal farm like Baloo's from Christian County, and so he is a fully developed character.
He is. He is on the page too, very fully. That's great. Well, any last words about the library? What do you think's going to happen here?
I think a huge victory is won. I think Allison's resignation was a victory, whether she thinks it or not. I
mean, even though so many people were thanking her for her service after she resigned.
It sounded like they were clapping that she was walking up.
I know, everyone was like, thank you. What you didn't see on camera was all the roses being thrown towards her. No, I'm just kidding.
It's sort of like Emperor going down the Via de Plage?
Yes.
Yeah, the Emperor.
I forget the right road for it.
Oh, it's something.
Something.
The way.
Yeah, and so it's sort of like an emperor leaving, conquering. Mm-hmm. So we definitely have that image with Allison, and she left, and I think we have the lawsuit you have to deal with, and then you might have future lawsuits. But I do think in the long run, the library is going to resolve itself and become a template for how to resolve problems like Maria.
Yes, that's a problem. Yeah, because I think really it takes, I would say the first thing it really takes is prayer.
Yes.
I mean, it starts with one person standing up and then another person will stand up. But what is really the power behind all this, the engine behind all this, is God.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to beat him.
No.
So I think prayer and boldness. We need boldness in this time, I think.
Courage.
Yeah, and I should probably have said the thread through all of this has been God beating the snot out of me. to get me where I am. Whether it was seminary, or whether it was my illness, or whether it was getting me to write again, or whether it was me being involved in this process at all, it has absolutely been God being the center of all of it, the architect of it all. I am not worthy to be part of this process. I am the least interesting person who is involved in this fight.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that at all.
It's just
But
factually untrue.
but everybody is so unique, and there's just the spiritual synergy that has happened around this. Shows to me that there is some kind of an awakening going on.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're willing, if you're humble enough to stand up for God and his children, because that's really, the core issue is to protect the innocence of children. I think he blesses what's being done. So even though, things happen, it's quite the adventure.
It's an adventure, yes.
And I'd like to bring everybody along. Wouldn't that be great if everybody could,
We all get to go ahead.
Yeah, but I mean, just resolve it on both sides. That would be the most wonderful thing.
Well, what we wanted in the first place.
I know.
When Mary had the very first meeting,
Right.
Her goal was always, "Hey, Renee, can we resolve this like two grown adults having a conversation and be reasonable and ask what is best for children?"
Mm-hmm.
And all Renee had to say, "Hey, you know what? This is a rational idea, not a Christian idea, not a matter of faith or not. This is just a rational
that's
idea."
so interesting, because if there had been a little bit of compromise, we wouldn't know 90% of what we now know. That it doesn't just end with sexually explicit books. It's diversity, equity, inclusion. It's critical race theory.
Mm-hmm.
It's the whole kit and caboodle. And it's actually exposed the underbelly of this movement to destabilize and overturn our country. And it's on the local, it's in our schools. I mean, My goodness, the amount of Marxism that's running school boards, that's running superintendents, it's really ungodly what's happened. If I would say anything to parents, it would be, you guys have to wake up. You have to get involved. You can no longer sit on the sidelines. If you don't get involved now, it's going to just implode. And you don't want your children to be in that,
Yeah, it's not a library problem. It is a cultural problem.
Yeah.
Everywhere. It is everywhere.
Exactly. I've seen a lot of people go, well, the internet's way worse for children, and most kids have cell phones and most kids have access to the internet, so why are you worrying about the library? And my kind of like sticking point that I think of is like, this is one thing that I can fix. Mm-hmm. And so why wouldn't I fix this?
Yes.
Why wouldn't I work towards change on this? I mean, can I fix the internet? No. I mean, I'm not an Elon Musk or, Zuckerberg or somebody where I can fix all but I can fix this. I can go to our local library and I can make sure that children at the library are safer.
Yes. There are even solutions to fixing the internet.
There are, but this is one. It's kind of like how to eat an elephant. You take one bite at a time.
But Texas has passed laws against, you have to be at least an adult to access pornography. Mm-hmm. So there are states that have passed those types of laws. It's not impossible.
You're right.
And so it is, that kind of logic isn't logic. It is just throwing Jell-O against the wall and you hope, oh, look, that idea is going to stick. Sorry, I'm making fun of liberals.
How dare you? We never do that.
Well, gosh, this has been fun. Thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate you.
Definitely. Yeah, thanks, Dan. All right, see you later, everybody.